We are down here in Niagara Falls, Ontario. We have a flag upside down in distress, and we are about to Morse code SOS across the border to our neighbors. We are asking for help. We are hostages in our province now. We are no longer free to do whatever we want as our charter allows us. Our tyrannical government here in Ontario, Doug Ford, the public health ministers that are the puppet strings above him, have decided that whatever public safety measures they've come up with whatever projections they've imagined, are more important than our charter rights of mobility. And they are wrong. So we are here, guys. We're just about to get started in a second. We're going to Morse code SOS across the border. And somebody even notified the Border Patrol. And they are waiting for this message. So this is what it's all about, guys. Take action.
Alrighty, guys.
Take action. Do more than just
Everybody
protest.
over to the wall.
Freedom isn't
And we're
free,
going to
my
have
friend.
Yeah.
a little 1, 2, 3.
Price of freedom is eternal vigilance.
What he's going to do for the Morse code, and we're going to imitate it with our lights. Like I said.
Implemented the strictest measures in all of North America. And the difficult truth is, every public health measure we have left comes with a massive cost to people and their lives. But we have never shied away from doing what's necessary.
We have made the deliberate decision to temporarily enhance police officers' authority for the duration of the stay-at-home order. Moving forward, police will have the authority to require any individual who is not in a place of residence to, first, provide their purpose for not being at home, and provide their home address. Police will also have the authority to stop a vehicle to inquire about an individual's reason for leaving their residence.
And our inspector.
All right, so welcome to Policy Matters. This is your boy MagMongoSlade. And so Canada is in trouble with the COVID response. And it's not a surprise. This is what happens when you declare that healthcare is a human right or some nonsense like that, and that it's a public good. We're going to read some articles today about our good buddies over in Canada, and I'm from Detroit, right across the water from Canada. And this is coming to a state near you, California and New York, which wants to be Canada so badly. They want to be European more than they want to be American. They are on the verge of doing something like this. And that's why I do this video, because people need to realize what happens when you have a nanny state that wants to take care of you from cradle to grave. It's like a smothering mother, right? If you're never allowed to flap your wings and fly away, they demand that you stay in the house. It was the same thing in China. When China, who also has a nanny state, and by nanny state, I mean not only severe and very, very high public accommodations. Let's put it like that. Welfare systems and all that crap. But also you have social health care systems, or you have the social credit system. Everything is a social responsibility. But the biggest issue is the with the government running the healthcare system. Right? When the government decides that healthcare is a public good, you're going to have problems like this. It's always going to happen. It's always going to happen. See, Canada always had problems with overrun in their healthcare system. It's always been a problem. But what do you think it was going to happen in a pandemic? That, people were running to the hospital for every little thing because they think they might have the virus. So they're running to the hospital all the time. The hospitals get overrun. Big surprise. But the hospitals are overrun anyway because it's a public good, meaning you can't turn anyone away. I'm going to give you the definition of a public good from a textbook in a minute and tell you why it's a bad thing. But this is what happens when you decide that healthcare is a public good. Now you have to do something in order to prevent the overwhelming of the system. And this is not the same as what was going on in the United States, by the way. See, the lockdowns were fascist, indeed. The lockdowns were fascist. But we did not have police stopping people in the street, which is what Canada has just called for. You have to tell the police why you are going somewhere and what your reasoning for leaving your house is. As we saw in China, where they welded people into their homes and then just picked up their dead bodies later. If they committed suicide, did they die of the virus? Nobody knows. They welded citizens into their house. And that's a communist country. Canada is very close to being communist. But let's get into these articles. This is from CP24. Ontario asks other provinces for nurses to help overrun hospitals. This is from April 16th, 2021. The Ontario government is turning to other provinces and territories for nurses and healthcare professionals to help, quote, increasingly strained hospitals that are grappling with a surge in COVID-19 patients. In a letter obtained by CTV News Ontario, Ontario's Deputy Minister Helen Angus wrote to all of her counterparts across the country about the strained hospital capacity in Ontario due to the deadly pandemic. She said the province is urgently looking for human resources and asking her counterparts if they could send mostly ICU nurses and other healthcare professionals to Ontario to assist these overwhelmed hospitals. The government estimates that Ontario might have a gap in staffing of around 4,145 nurses in the hospital sector alone over the next 4 months. I recognize the challenges all jurisdictions face as a result of the pandemic, but the challenges we are facing here in Ontario are such I feel I must seek to identify whether there are resources available in the country that could be directed to Ontario if possible. So there's a list of what they need. They need 620 healthcare professionals, 500 nurses, 100 respiratory therapists, 10 perfusionists, 10 anesthesia assistants. Angus said the assistance is mostly needed in Southern Ontario, particularly in COVID-19 hotspots in the Greater Ontario area. We are projecting a need for this critical support for 4 months following the anticipated peak of the third wave. However, the length of the deployment is subject to COVID-19 caseload and ICU capacity in the province, she wrote. Temporary relocation expenses will be provided to those deployed in Ontario. Alberta responded to the letter Friday morning, stating it is not in a position to send their healthcare workers out of the province. When the pandemic began, Alberta itself in a surplus of PPE and shipped over 35 million units of gloves, masks, goggles, and ventilators to our friends in BC, which is British Columbia, Ontario, and Quebec. However, with COVID-19 cases and hospitalizations on a sharp rise here in Alberta, we are simply not in a position to send our healthcare workers outside the province at this time. So our priority must be with the health and safety of Albertans, and that means making sure our hospitals are adequately staffed to treat COVID-19 patients. All right, so I'm not going to read this whole thing, but I'm going to read a little bit more of it. It says, with a record of 1,955 COVID-19 patients in Ontario hospitals in the last 24 hours, and 701 of those in ICUs, Warner says hospitals are nearing the point of having to prioritize life-saving treatment based on a person's likelihood of surviving. That is rationalizing healthcare. They're going to be rationalizing healthcare. It's going to be rationing, which is what the United States, when we was going through this whole ordeal and we were calling it death panels, we're going to decide who lives and who dies. That's the state for you. When you give the state the power, they're going to decide who lives and who dies. When you have it as independence, then people may have their own decisions. They may choose not to even go to the doctor because this might not even be worth it. They might not feel too bad. So it's not just COVID, though. Here's the crazy thing. When people started going to the hospitals for COVID, everything else didn't stop. People didn't stop getting cancer. Then people didn't stop having heart attacks. People didn't stop getting into car accidents. And, everything, the life continued. Life continued. So all of the things that people keep talking about as far as, COVID is overwhelming our systems. It's like everything continued to happen. This is just one more thing on top of all the other things. Let's see if I can read a little bit more of this. Let's see. I mean, every hospital has gone through simulation of this. It's been socialized. It's been practiced. It's our greatest fear. And I actually can't see a situation where some form of triage doesn't take place. This is where Dr. Warner, head of critical care at Michael Garrion Hospital in Canada, has said. It says, during the first wave of pandemic last year, long-term care home residents and Ontarians over 80 years old were overwhelmingly infected and dying from the virus. He says, this is, about 50-year-olds not getting life support, not 80-year-olds. Not that life is more important for one person than the other, but the stakes are so much higher now, which is why we have to do everything to protect people from what I think is going to be an eventuality. The government is deciding who lives and who dies. They're deciding that at 50, you have a better chance of living than at 30. 30, 50 and 30, 80 to 50, right? So if you're a 30-year-old, you might get those life-saving treatments. If you're 50, maybe not. If you're 80, probably not. So when they was yelling and screaming about, oh, you need to do this to save grandma, not only was grandma literally dying in Michigan and New York and other places where they just threw sick people in nursing homes, but they also, in the socialized medical care system that they love, I'm talking about the progressives, they're openly admitting that they were going to have to ration care. They're openly admitting that they were going to have to ration care. Too bad. I'm not going to read any more of this. It's just more of the same. It's just more of the same stuff. Canada is in deep trouble. Canada is in deep trouble. So April 17th. Ontario very close to running out of ICU space, doctor says. So you got doctors saying that they're running out of ICU space. This is what happens when you declare that healthcare is a public good and therefore should be free and nobody should have to pay for anything. So what is a public good? This is from a textbook by David L. Weimer, Aiden R. Vining, Policy Analysis. A public good. A public good is non-rivalrous and non-excludable. Non-rivalrous, a good non-rivalrous is consumption when more than one person can derive consumption benefits from some level of supply at the same time. A good is non-excludable if it is impractical for one person to maintain exclusive control over its use. Right? So that's what a public good is. A public good is non-rivalrous, non-excludable, meaning more than one person can use it and you can't stop other people from using it. Healthcare is not necessarily this. Healthcare is made this. It is made a public good. It is not naturally a public good. You can exclude people. And in private hospitals, people do it all the time. But it's considered bad form to deny people health care. Even in the United States. They just dump you in debt in the U.S. But in Canada, you're sitting. Look, see, the crazy thing is, you have to ask people, have they ever even, when they talk about things like universal health care, you have to ask the question, like, bro, have you ever even been to a free clinic? Like, I've been to free clinics. To get even just the most basic stuff done, like getting blood work or just seeing a doctor, you're talking about maybe packing a lunch and being there for 5 or 6 hours. Maybe longer. I went to the free clinic one time. It was several years ago. It was here in Detroit because I didn't need that much done. It was just, I thought I was having issues breathing. Went to the free clinic. Why not? It was a long line of old Muslim women, old Mexican women, their sons, grandchildren, and just about everyone else was in there. I sat in one spot for probably about 5 or 6 hours. And that was just to get seen by the assistants, which are college students. And then you have to wait another 2 or 3 hours after they, check your temperature, check your heart rate, weigh you, all that type of stuff, and get your vitals. Then you have to come back 2 or 3 hours later to see the doctor. And these clinics are not open all day. They're open for about 12 hours. That's about it. Maybe from 9 to 9 or something like that. So you have to get there early. They have a shut off too. Like they're like, okay, look, we can't. So by 9:15, they're pretty much full for the day because they know they're going to be in there all day. It's a lot of commotion, a lot of craziness. You go to private doctors' offices, there is no wait. Now that means you have to have money, of course, but it also means that if you need to see the doctor, you can see the doctor. It also means if you need something, you can get it done, whether it be quick or, long or whatever the case may be. That is when you make a hospital or a clinic or something non-rivalrous. More than one person can use this at a time. Non-excludable. You can't stop other people from using it. You create a public good, you create a public problem. And then the government doesn't know what to do because it's inevitable that they're going to run into some type of situation. They're going to start locking people into their homes. They're going to turn the country into a police state where you're going to start getting arrested for leaving the house. You're going to get arrested for leaving the house because you're overwhelming our system. Well, if it wasn't your system, it wouldn't be your problem. But it is your system, and this is what Canadians wanted. And I see this all the time. I see it with Europeans all the time. They always talk about how, in the United States, I'm so glad I stay in England. We don't have these crazy healthcare situations that they have in America. And it's like, well, you also have a lot of people, or especially that one particular time where England pulled a cord on some kid. I wish I could remember what, the exact names of them. But, these governments are making the decision of whether people live or die. And that is exactly what we don't want in the United States. When the Republicans were screaming about death panels, and then you had the Democrats screaming about, oh, you're killing grandma for your COVID response. This is horrible. This is fascism. All of the fascist nations, Japan, even the communist ones too, they had public health care. You can't have a warfare system without public health care. It was one of the first things that Japan did. The emperor would go through and he made sure you were taken care of from cradle to grave. And because you were taken care of from cradle to grave, you were expected to die for Japan. So they would say, hey, get in this airplane and fly into a building. And you were expected to do it. And you were honored for it, sure. But that's when your life doesn't mean anything. Now, in the United States, we have public health care for soldiers too, which is why they are in forever wars. Because we'll just take care of them when they get back. You've lost a limb, you lost your mind, no problem. We'll take care of it. Just go out there and get blown up or blow somebody else up. Whatever comes out of that, we'll pay for it. Just go do it. You're taught that you don't matter. The government decides who lives and who dies. How much they're going to spend on one particular person or one particular situation. The government decides, and not your family. Your family may make the hard decision that, you know what, we don't have a lot of money. Tough decision, sure. But grandma's 86. I don't know. Like, should we go into a complete and total bankruptcy to keep grandma alive? That's a tough decision for the family to make, but it's the decision that the family can make because they're the ones paying for it. You want the government making that decision? The government they tax people and they're taking your money either way. They take your money and kill grandma. They take your money and pull the plug on grandma. So that's the situation that people don't understand. They say, okay, well, at least they have a chance in a socialized system. I say, no, they don't. Because in a system or a private system, you can save your money and just pay for the funeral. Like, I'm sorry, grandma, you 88. I don't know what to do. It'll cost less to bury you than it would be to keep you alive. And that's, again, it's a tough situation, but it's a situation that people have to live with. And then you say the government has the money. They just don't have the materials. They don't have the manpower. So they take your money and let your grandma die. You can't do that in a private system. In a private system, you have to make the decision where you're just gonna let grandma die peacefully in her bed, surrounded by her family who there for her and all that kind of stuff, which I went through when my grandma died. She died several years ago before the pandemic. My grandfather died during the pandemic. We didn't even get to have much of a funeral. But we are in a system now where the government is deciding who lives and who dies. And then they're arresting people. They're turning it into a police state. You have people outside the American border with the Canadian flag upside down, signaling SOS to the United States. This is as bad as when Hong Kong were flying American flags because China was trying to take over. Why do these countries keep appealing to the United States? Where you have a whole sector of the United States that are trying to follow suit. Don't look here. Don't look here for help. Because the Democrats want to be Europeans. They want to be communist Chinese. They want to have one party rule. They're talking about packing the court, 13 Supreme Court justices. Of course, they're going to vote the way that the Democrats want them to vote. That's the point. They're trying to shut down anybody else's power. And I don't mean to get, partisan on it because the Republicans are weak and stupid, so it doesn't matter. But I'm just telling you like it is. And that's why I don't like to bury people in data and definitions and all that other stuff. I like to have conversations. This is a conversation about when you have a healthcare system that is socialized, then it becomes a problem. Because, of course, people are going to start using it. It's always been this way. This is not a new problem. But the solutions are to chase people down in cop cars, pull them over, and demand, you tell me why you're outside of your house. Where are you going? What are you doing? And I know people are going to be like, well, it's illegal. They rolled it back, and they did. All right. There's an article from April 17th. Ontario walks back new policing powers following pushback. The Canadian Civil Liberties Association pauses legal challenge following amendments. Ontario government walked back some of its new policing powers one day after they were announced. Not only allowing police to stop vehicles or people if they are suspected of participating in an organized public event or social gathering. Doug Ford's government initially said on Friday that the police could stop people at random and ask why they were not at home and where they live as part of a strengthened stay-at-home order to help stem a rising COVID-19 cases. In a statement Saturday, Solicitor General Sylvia Jones said officers will no longer have the right to stop any pedestrian or vehicle to ask why they are out or request their home address. Quote, if a police officer or other provincial officers has reason to suspect that you are participating in an organized event or social gathering, they may require you to provide information to ensure you are complying with restrictions. Every individual who is required to provide a police officer or other provincial officers with information shall promptly comply. The statement said the government's priority has always been to discourage gatherings and crowds that violate the stay-at-home order. The price of a ticket if individuals refuse to comply remains $750. That is why we provide police services with additional temporary authority to enforce the stay-at-home order by putting a stop to gatherings and crowds, the statement read. The change came after several police services across Ontario took to social media on Friday saying they won't comply with the new powers to stop people and question their reason for leaving in their home. Those are smart police officers. That's smart policing. Because you destroy any public trust. And trust, as we, maybe I ought to do a video just based on that. But trust is how the system works. That's how human social systems work. If you don't trust anybody, you're not going to work. It's not going to work. So one of the reasons why police brutality and all this sorts of stuff is at an all-time high in the United States is because there's no trust. Police cannot trust that the people who are in their cars are not violent, not on drugs, not going to run away, not trying to run them over, not trying to shoot them. And there was at least one police shooting recently where that's exactly what happened. A lady was pulled over. The cop tried to arrest her because she had outstanding warrants. She ran. He chased her. She ran around the car. He chased her around the car. She went to her glove compartment. He tased her. She still grabbed the gun, shot him. And then he lit her up. And people were ready to burn the streets down. And then the cam came out that showed how polite this officer was and how nice he was being, and that she was the one being ridiculous and the one that had grabbed the gun and actually fired the first shot. But when you don't have any trust in police officers, people are going to be violent towards them because they're going to think, oh my God, these cops are going to kill me. And sometimes there's no reason to think they won't. But this is a good example of decent policing. All right. We can have a whole argument about policing. I don't want to get too far into that. But it's based a lot on social and public trust of the police. If the police are going to start enforcing fascist law, that's not even law. It's a violation of the Canadian Constitution or what they call the Charter of Human Rights. Because it's just a written document. As we know in the United States, there is no such thing as a permanent constitutional amendment. So this is what happens. People are deciding what your rights are. They're deciding whether you have rights or not. I went 20 minutes talking about, socialized medicine, right? Now I could do another 20 talking about how these people get to decide what your rights are. Whether they can decide whether you have the right to leave your house or not. It's fascism. Let's continue this article. Legal challenge on pause. Before the changes were made, the Canadian Civil Liberties Association issued a statement Saturday saying it had retained counsel and was preparing to go to court in the coming days to challenge Friday's announced regulations. But following the amendments to the regulations by Solicitor General Saturday night, the CCLA said it would take yes for an answer and put this legal challenge on pause as the revised order, quote, restores an investigative detention standard for police stops. CCLA Director Michael Bryant, a former Liberal Attorney General in Ontario, had previously called the new policing measures, quote, a Black Friday of right slashing by Queen's Park, following the Ontario government's announcement on Friday. The new order rationalizes and narrows the constitutional Friday standard. The new standard is also tied to a public health objective and avoids arbitrary detention, Bryant said. Quote, it means people should be returned to being as free as they were before this happened. That may be a freedom wrongly curbed by racial profiling, police bias, and discrimination, which we will continue to fight. Of course, they have to blame everything on racism, right? In an earlier statement from Saturday, Bryant said the original regulations brought back the odious driving while black police stop and introduced a, quote, walking while black offense. So the only reason they're doing this is because they claim it's going to be racist. They're arguing with the stay-at-home, with the police having so much more power on grounds that it's racist. Not that it violates your human rights. Only that, it's racist. And then back to that old driving around black bullshit, which is bullshit, by the way. It's bullshit. You know, there's been plenty of studies that show that black people actually speed more than whites. They actually more than likely drive with suspended licenses. They're more likely to drive with busted tail lights. You know, different things that come with, being getting tickets. And we can argue that those things the cops shouldn't detain people for stupid stuff like having a busted tail light, right? But that's what happens. You have people getting stopped, not because they're black, that's stupid, but because they're driving in violation of whatever stupid government law it is. So driving while black was always dumb. Well, it says, quote, blanket powers for police to stop vehicles like this bends our constitutional freedoms too far and will cause a rash of racial profiling, said Michael Bryant. So it's not because you have civil human rights to not be harassed by the police. That's not why we're arguing against these fascist laws. We're arguing against these fascist laws because our pet Negroes might get upset. You might stop too many of our pet Negroes. These people are ridiculous. They're ridiculous. Canada is not serious. It's not. But I guess I should be excited at least that they did something, right? That Canada didn't just roll over and let the police do whatever they want. That there were some people who were like, hey, we can't let this happen, eh? But it got to be not because it's wrong flatly, but because, oh no, driving while black, walking while black, being black is a crime. Of course, assuming that black people are just going to flaunt these laws, by the way, because they already know that they are. I mean, they already know they will. I mean, it is what it is, man. It is. Now, let's go to the police officers. So there's a piece in here. I don't want to keep y'all too much longer, but there's a little piece in here about the police officers who refused. It says, on Friday, a number of police services took to social media to say they had no intention of conducting random stops. The announcement were largely welcomed by people online, but others, including author and activist Desmond Cole, who has been outspoken on issues of police racism and use of force, were skeptical that they were anything more than public relations tactics. All the police are saying is, if we stop you, it will be for a good reason, Cole told CBS News. That doesn't help members of the public, black and indigenous people without a place to stay right now, who are outside disabled people, who are always targeted by the police. It doesn't give them any comfort. Cole said he saw the orders as an attempt by Ford to shift blame as COVID-19 cases were on the rise and more, quote, more people are scared. Premier Ford needs a scapegoat, he said. So just as he did last April, he's saying individuals will now be punished for being outside. Here's the crazy thing. Why are we talking to activists? We're talking to activists. That's a big problem that we have, especially in the United States, is activists are not specialists. Activists are not intellectuals. You know, I don't understand why they get first dibs when it comes to the media. I don't get that. Maybe it's not for me to understand. But this is ridiculous. I'm not going to talk anymore about this. Done here. Canada is, look, socialism is one step from communism, one step from fascism. Fascism is socialism taken to the next level. Both of them are. All right? Let people tell you all day that fascism is a right-wing idea because it takes in nationalism. There's nothing more nationalistic than a nationalized healthcare system, nationalized police forces, both of which progressives want. Okay? There is nothing there is some things that are right-wing about fascism, but fascism is an inherently left-wing concept. It springs out of a socialistic mindset. You read the definition of fascism that Benito Mussolini actually wrote, and Giovanni Gentile, it says, quite frankly, socialism doesn't go far enough. Everything within the state, nothing outside of the state. The state. When people are talking about individual liberties, individual rights, that would be, mostly libertarians, objectivists, and some anarchists, things like that. That cannot be fascism. It is not fascistic for people to be individuals. It is the other way around. It is fascistic for the state to decide who lives and who dies, who should get arrested and who shouldn't. So, you have people getting arrested for violating the stay-at-home order. Nobody's getting arrested for rioting. That's because you live in a fascist country. Because the laws don't matter. who you are matters, and what you're doing and why you're doing it matters. That's not rule of law. But like I said, I'm not going to go too much further with this. Canada is, they dipped their toe in fascism. And some people saw it coming. A lot of people should have seen it coming. A lot of Americans saw it coming because they don't, I mean, you have to be cautious of government. That's what makes the United States different from other countries. Other countries get into that whole, but your government is looking out for you. Why would you do that? The government's looking out for you. You hear that from Europeans and Canadians and shit all the time. Australians, New Zealanders, where they just decide to take your guns away. Oh, they're taking your guns away to help you. So only the government can have guns. And then they complain about the police. So they want you to have no protection. You're not allowed to have a personal gun. You're also not allowed to have a police. So what are you going to do? Just be a victim, cower in the corner. As people come into your house, take whatever they want, come into your store, take whatever they want, set fire to it. And then, let's just throw that in here. Matter of fact, let's just do this. There were some socialistic-minded journalists who were claiming that violence against buildings is not violence. They have redefined violence. Violence is only between two people. If a person throws a brick through a window, it's not violent. That's not violence. In defense of looting. I'm telling you, man. There is no standards. That's how you know you live in a totalitarian system. There's no standards. There's no law for you to appeal to. There's nobody for you to appeal to. So in having so much government authority, you have personally no authority. And the government decides whether you're actually being assaulted or not. You don't get to make that decision. The government makes that decision. And then they can decide you being attacked. Well, it's not our problem. You shouldn't have had too much money. You shouldn't be running your business in this place. And now they're deciding who lives and who dies and telling the police to go out there and arrest people for leaving the house, for the horrible crime of leaving the house. All right, man. Thank you guys for your time. And I'll talk to you guys later, man. Peace out.